All right, guys. Well, welcome to the backstage of the Pacific Bitcoin Festival. You guys just got off the stage. I'm here with Preston Pysh, Rapha Zagury, and Sam Callahan. Good to have you guys. Did an amazing presentation titled "A Trillion Reasons to Buy Bitcoin." So maybe TLDR here. Sam, you were moderating. What was your takeaway from your recent moderation?
Well, I think there really are trillions of reasons why to own Bitcoin in the wake of banking failures, widespread currency debasement, trillions of dollars worth of fiscal deficits and debt accumulating at a rapid pace. All those are great reasons why to own Bitcoin. Add on top of that increased financial censorship. I mean, seems like a great asset to own to me. So these two just kind of broke it down in a good way.
It might be like 33 trillion reasons to buy Bitcoin, but we can boil it down to 1 trillion reason. Preston, I noticed you had a lot of optimism in regards to not only the future of Bitcoin, but people taking Bitcoin into self-custody. And I find it interesting. There's been a lot of talk about Bitcoin ETFs and all that stuff, and how as a Bitcoiner, we're like, the most important thing is for people to be taking Bitcoin into self-custody. So what do you think we have in store for us the next 3 to 6 months in regards to Bitcoin?
3 to 6 months. I think you're going to see an ETF get approved probably around Christmas, maybe a little bit after into the first quarter. And then it's going to be a race, right? It's going to be a race between Fidelity, BlackRock, all the big ones. I mean, there's tons of filings. And it's going to be, how are they custodying it? Right now, it seems like every single one of them, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody else here knows different, but I think every one of them's saying that they're going to do their custody at Coinbase.
Yes.
So for me, that's kind of the concern. And, I highlighted that when we were on stage, but I think that that's going to be the really big news that kind of breaks out in the coming 3 to 6 months. And I think that you're going to see, I expect a lot of price action to come with it. So
volatility to the upside.
I think so. I think it's going to be, because you've had so much selling that's happened over the last year and a half that's kind of played out. And so you're kind of in this supply suffocation period of the market, of the cycle that we're in. And you kind of combine that with an ETF approval. And I think you're not just going to get the approval. I think you could potentially even have BlackRock come out and say, hey, we think that this is something that you should have 0.5% or 1% as part of your portfolio mix. And that could be really profound with an organization, a bank of that size, to come out and recommend something like that.
Love it. Do you think there will be some favoritism in regard to the BlackRock ETF, or will they all get approved at the same time?
I don't know.
Okay.
I can't comment.
Okay, love it. All right. Well, Rapha, what's your thoughts on everything going on right now? I know you guys were just on stage, but maybe just TLDR on your thoughts moving forward the next couple of months in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I hardly try to predict anything in a couple of months for Bitcoin, because who knows?
Well, then long-term view.
But I agree with Preston. I think the ETF is front and center in everybody's mind, right? I think the ETF, high chance of being approved. But remember, at the end of the day, we're all trading the SEC and a lot of politicians' minds, which is impossible to predict and impossible to know exactly what they're going to do. So who knows? I think there's a high probability it gets approved. And when it gets approved, as Preston said, I think price action is going to be crazy. There's going to be a lot of volume going to Bitcoin. And, the way that they're structuring the ETF, real Bitcoin needs to be bought, right? So someone somewhere is going to have to sell their Bitcoin for the ETF holders. They're not getting my Bitcoin, I can tell you that. But they're definitely, and that's the other point, that we didn't mention there, but Preston kind of alluded to it, is that price is made on the margin, right? So right now, if there's a little bit of demand, there are traders are actually getting on that side of the trade, right? But if you really have a lot of demand, you're going to wipe out through the traders very quickly. And the price if you look at the price curve for where the hodlers is, I'll tell you, my Bitcoin price is nowhere near the price that we see on the screen right now. They're gonna have, they're gonna have to pay me a lot of money to take that out of my hard code storage.
Yeah,
right?
the HODL buyout zone is real, and you got to make it past that price point. Jump in, Sam.
Yeah, no, I think that the ETF, I'm surprised that the price is where it is right now because markets are forward looking and there is so much optimism about a spot Bitcoin ETF. And I think there's a dark cloud still hanging over everything, and that's Binance and what's going on over there.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are kind of wondering what's actually going to happen there. There's a lot of uncertainty. I think in the next 6 months, we might actually see some like criminal charges come down based on what I've read in the SEC lawsuits. And it's just, there's a lot of messy stuff there. Let's just say that. And I think when you think about the concerns of the SEC or why they've rejected a spot Bitcoin ETF, it's around market manipulation. Think about the volumes that Binance has and the alleged charges of market manipulation by the SEC. And so if that gets out of the way and that uncertainty kind of resolves, and then maybe the SEC feels comfortable with Binance kind of at least having reduced market share, maybe that leads the way to a Bitcoin spot Bitcoin ETF approval. And that's kind of what I see. I'm looking at Binance, I'm looking at the spot Bitcoin ETF, and I think they're actually related to each other over the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, not to speculate, but I think we're all kind of seeing the same thing and wondering if Gary Gensler is, slow rolling these ETFs so that we can clear out Binance in the wake of, a BlackRock, Larry Fink, I don't know, cornering of the market, maybe we could say.
Personally, I don't think they're going to pick a favorite. Like I know this is speculation, but I just think it would be so obvious if they just pick BlackRock. I think it's much more likely that they'll just approve all of them at once, and then it's just free market competition of spot Bitcoin ETFs, and they're going to have to compete based on things like fees and maybe they'll even allow to take custody of the Bitcoin. Like one ETF will decide to allow that, take actually self custody of the Bitcoin, similar to certain gold ETFs that you see. Like some of them you can take physical custody of the gold, others you can't. Maybe you'll see some competition emerge from different spot Bitcoin ETFs.
I think just at that point, the SEC already gave a lot of preference to BlackRock, right? People miss that. But today, if all of the ETFs are launched at the same time, all of them, they're out there, they're launched today. Which one do you think that retail is going to buy? They're going to buy the BlackRock one, right? True. And BlackRock was given the path, like, okay, you have to do all of these things. If you do all of these things, right, your ETF may qualify. And a guarantee that came from conversations with the SEC, right? So the preference was given already. It doesn't matter if they got approved first or together with everybody right now. They already got all the assets are going to flow to this ETF. And on the ETF space, it unfortunately usually is that winner takes it all. So there's a high chance that this ETF is going to be BlackRock ETF is going to be the Bitcoin ETF. Regardless of the approval process, right? I would actually risk saying that even if they get approved second or third in line, they're still going to capture a lot of the assets, if not the majority of the assets.
Can I ask you a question? That's a great point. But GBTC still has a lot of billions and billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. If they're just allowed to convert right there, is that enough of a lead? Or do you think the funds will flow to BlackRock?
I think the funds will flow to BlackRock. I think GBTC has a dark spot on the brand. And who knows, right? If I hold GBTC today and it gets converted to an ETF and I have the flexibility to do something, first of all, I would sell out of that, get Bitcoin, which I think is the right move to do, right? Premium goes to zero, you get out, you buy your Bitcoin, and then you're holding in cold storage. But if there's another alternative there, like the BlackRock ETF, I think it's just preferable. It's cleaner, right? It's just starting. Who knows what actually the structure of GBTC, what has happened in the past,
credible sponsor and
exactly
more access.
I wouldn't take that risk. There's, it's a very small probability that there's a problem, but if there is a problem, it's large magnitude, right? Fair. So you don't want to take that risk.
Love it. Well, we know that there's a very huge concern in regards to the Bitcoin maximalists about an ETF and paper Bitcoin. So for maybe the people that aren't so aware, why is a Bitcoin ETF so important for just further proving the maturation of Bitcoin as a financial vehicle moving forward?
I can take that. I think that the ETF is kind of like it's an entry point, right? I think I'm a maxi. I think first of all, everybody should hold Bitcoin. There's no other coin out there that anybody should hold, right? And I actually think that if you're going to hold Bitcoin, you should have Bitcoin in cold storage. That's what you should have, right? That being said, the reality is that for institutions, for family offices, for high net worth individuals, for pensions, for a lot of investors out there that should have Bitcoin in their balance sheet, right? Because it makes sense, their balance sheet. It's hard for them to think outside of the custody box of like, okay, I have Fidelity is my broker, so I need to open this new account. I need to have keys, and I have to key management. How I'm gonna? It's completely afar from their reality on today. Today, they're not gonna do that. There's a lot of potential risk for them for doing that, right? Imagine keys get lost. Imagine something in the process doesn't work, or somebody scams them out of their Bitcoin, right? They don't want to take that risk. They want to have a custodian. They want to have somebody that's actually overseeing the Bitcoin. Is it right? No, completely wrong. They shouldn't do that, but that's the way that they're thinking about it. I think, the first step is to get them to have a Bitcoin ETF. They will understand the asset. They understand why the asset is important. They'll see the benefits in portfolio allocation, right? How it diversifies their exposure, how it actually protects them on the downside. And then they start learning about all the fundamentals about Bitcoin, the 21 million cap and all of that. Naturally, that's going to lead them, I think, down the road when there are solutions out there to have, safer custody, to actually hold their keys and to actually understand that they, or at the minimum, see the Bitcoin that they hold in their UTXO sitting somewhere somehow, right? That it reflects their position, not somebody else's position.
Yeah, and I think Preston, you touched on the idea that all the ETFs right now are using Coinbase, or at least talking about using Coinbase as a custodian. How big of a concern is that moving forward if everyone is using Coinbase as their custodian? Is that something that you worry about, or do you think it'll just be a natural phenomenon of the free market figuring out what the best custodian solutions are?
So it's no issue for me, that's for sure. And it's no issue for anybody that actually self-custodies their Bitcoin. In fact, if they would lose all the keys, like, it makes the value of my Bitcoin go up. But I obviously don't want that to happen for people. So the reason I raised the issue is because I understand human nature. I understand that most people are just going to want some turnkey solution that they can buy out of their, whatever trading account they've got. And if all of that's being custodied by one entity, and that entity is corrupted in some kind of way, well, then all of those people that are relying on that turnkey solution are going to get screwed. So that's the reason I bring it up. It's really to kind of help others just kind of think through, there needs to be some way that that's not how this is implemented. But I don't see how I can impact that other than just education. I'm curious if these guys have an opinion now.
I mean, the other way is to just build better tools that make it easier for people to self-custody as an industry, really focus on that. And, with an ETF, I think you guys are right. I mean, from a convenience standpoint, people are going to continue to choose it. But it's up to us as an industry to kind of build better tools that make the UX better and allow people to feel more comfortable. Because I was speaking with a couple of financial advisors, and they were very surprised when they asked their clients, are you guys interested in the spot Bitcoin ETF, allocating some funds to that? And these are clients that were very against Bitcoin. And they're like, oh, it's an ETF. Oh yeah, we can do that. We can do 1%, because it's just like they don't have to deal with the keys, and it's a reality of the situation where it scares people off if they're not technical. And even though we know that self-custodying your Bitcoin is how you become like sovereign with Bitcoin, it's a really important part of Bitcoin's value proposition to not have counterparty risk. It scares people off. So I think as an industry, it's just up to us to kind of educate and build tools around that and the risk. But I'm not really concerned of centralization in Coinbase, like Preston said. If Bitcoin was proof of stake, I'd be concerned. But with proof of work, it doesn't matter if one entity or a group of people own a lot of Bitcoin. They can't change the rules of the protocol.
And I think, if we actually look, we are in very, very early stages of UX, UI in Bitcoin, right? And that includes institutional custody. We are starting to see some things that I think are very, very interesting. I think what Unchained just came up with from their multi-institutional custody, I think it's super interesting, right? That's one, we're building Swan Institutional exactly to do things like that, right? Because we realize, I can stay here all day long and tell people you should hold your own keys, right? This is what you should do. You buy, your hard wallets, and this is what. That's not going to work for institutions, right? So we have to come up with some better UX, UI for them to gradually transition them to something that it's going to be, more useful and easier to use, right?
So you see multi-institutional custody being the way forward.
I don't know if it's the way forward. I think it's a step forward, right? So we're making a step, I think, in the right direction. It's better to do that than to have one institution holding your keys, right? There's still the risk that they may call you. There's still the risk that they may lose the keys and all. The risk's still there, but it's a reduction in risk, and I think it's a step closer to where we should be ultimately. Where's this heading? I don't know. The same way when I saw email going through BBSs in the 90s, right? I had no idea that email would end up in Outlook and, laptops everywhere and your cell phone in your pocket, right? But I think 10 years from now, we're going to have something that is very different than what we have today.
So on that point, so if I had to think of what this looks like 10 years from now, I would say on the payment side, you have way more people using Bitcoin for payments, which means there's demand for Bitcoin being loaded into channels. If there's a demand for that, that means that there's now a market for people wanting to self-custody because now they want to open channels in some type of turnkey way. I think that that's going to be, the UX around that is going to be drastically different than where it is today in 10 years from now. And so you're going to have this demand, you're going to have this incentive because you're going to get yield from putting those Bitcoin into these channels while you're still holding the keys. And there's going to need to be some type of technical solution that allows the person to kind of distribute their coins. Like, let's say you're sitting on 100 Bitcoin and you want to load those in the channels. Well, you don't want to put them all on one node. You want to put maybe them in 20 different nodes, right? That are, taking that risk and breaking it up into smaller chunks because they're all hot wallets. But I think that that's going to be an incentive for people to self-custody because they're able to actually capture what I think is going to be your risk-free rate in the future. And you're not seeing any of that today because there isn't demand for payments versus how many coins could be locked into these channels to produce any type of real yield and predictable yield at least. So I think that that's where this is going to go. And I think that that's going to be the incentive that actually drives it, but we're just way to the left in the timeline for it right now.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. I mean, in terms of the multi-party, multi-sig solutions, I do think it'll become the standard because you're just spreading out that custody risk amongst multiple institutions, and you're not depending on human processes like with a multi-sig or multi-party computation. There's still that like human process layer that can be subject to fraud and collusion. And so when you have things like Miniscript that enables that to be programmed, it's just a better way to do things. And so I do think it's going to be the standard for institutional custody moving forward. And so I'm really excited to see like different solutions start to get built right now, coming out of Wolf, coming out of like Anchor Watch. Like these are companies that are kind of thinking through this and building new tools.
Love it. Okay, guys, last question is, obviously I've been asking you guys to speculate a little bit about the Bitcoin ETF, but if we could speculate on what's going to happen on what we would say the inevitable bull run, is this just a perfect storm to seeing absolute massive God candles coming up in the next year or so after the halving?
Yes.
Yes.
See.
Okay. Well, you heard it here first, guys. You better be stacking sats. You better be taking Bitcoin into self-custody because Bitcoin is maturing and you guys are early. You guys are ahead of the average person's even understanding of what Bitcoin is. So make sure you're stacking sats, make sure you're taking into self-custody, and watch all the fireworks play out in the next couple of years. Anyways, guys, really appreciate your time and good luck and have a good rest of your time here at Pacific Bitcoin Festival.
Thanks, Andy.